a complex, chaotic and challenging business world from Monday to Friday, starts on Saturday and Sunday. And here in Bisnomics, we intend to train you, develop you, prepare you so that you can face those challenges of tomorrow with much greater confidence, with better insight and intel. This is your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Thalandu Amarasekara. Today our focus will be on the shipping and port related industries of Sri Lanka. This has been one sector that has been echoing in the business, political and social forums of Sri Lanka for the last few weeks and even months. But are we as a country leveraging right use or leveraging the strategic positioning that we have in the world map to our advantage? How can we be smarter in being a strategic player in the global economy? And how can we develop the Sri Lankan port and shipping related industries? How can we take that industry further and make it a strategic contributor to our economy? And joining me for today's discussion is an expert in this field of shipping and port related industries, the chairman of CASA, which is Ceylon Association of Shipping Agents, Mr. Ikram Kutila. Ikram, welcome to Bisnomics. It's a pleasure to have you. Let's sail through this industry and let's take a journey and see where we are doing right, what we need to avoid getting wrong, so that this industry can be a strategic contributor to our economy. Welcome to Bisnomics once again.
Thank you, Tharindu. Thank you very much for having me.
Ikram, let's talk about the contribution of ports and shipping related industries to our economy, and especially what has been the impact on this industry due to COVID-19.
I think the port and the port related industry has contributed about 3 to 4% of GDP. I think this is a huge industry and offers numerous services to the foreign ships, foreign ship owners and also the industry. I think the perception is that the port just berths ships, sails ships and does the cargo handling. But in fact, it's a huge other services that we offer, because
it's a bigger ecosystem than that.
Definitely there's a bigger ecosystem. The fundamental is the berthing and the sailing of ships and the cargo handling.
And that's what's visible to the naked eye
That
as
is
well.
Exactly. And besides that, there are other services that we offer. Other services like bunkering, other supply of various fresh water, provisions, etc., crew changes and all that. So the port industry itself is quite huge, and also it brings us foreign exchange to the Sri Lankan economy. And if you take the COVID situation, I think the port industry was affected quite badly during the COVID, because what we saw was that the port is an industry where the ships come, we have with a foreign crew, and also there is that fright that the crew will be bringing in the COVID, the infection.
Understood.
So obviously the Ports Authority,
that's a valid bit of a concern.
that's correct, yes. Obviously the Ports Authority, the health authorities ensured that they had the highest alert levels in the port, and also to ensure that the business also goes on, because the port is the nerve center of the economy, and if that shuts down, 95% of the cargo that comes in and goes out is basically blocked. So the port has to operate. It cannot be shut down, unlike the airport.
And I believe, Ikram, they did a good job, because we never heard of a port cluster or a port pokura.
Exactly. I think that is the advantage that we've had, and I think the Ports Authority, the health authorities, and also the defense services who are handling the control of the infection did an excellent job. I think when you take the port, the effect, what we see is a drop in the cargo volumes, mainly because we saw one imposition of various restrictions by the government because of the outflow of foreign exchange. So that saw a dip in imports. Also, we saw a dip in vessels calling because certain congestions that occurred mainly as a result of the COVID situation. The port volumes.
When you say congestion occurred, that you're talking about like backlog of work or documentation?
Yes, one is the berthing delays, one is the delay in the cargo being cleared by the importers, because they were shut down, they were locked down, warehouses were closed, etc. So there was a delay in cargo being cleared from the port, so that creates congestion.
And Ikram, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not something that was limited only to Sri Lanka. We saw this in USA, we saw this in Rotterdam, we saw this in UK, and so many countries were having these delays and issues.
In fact, those countries are still being affected.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way from that. I think now we don't talk of any congestion in the port. The imports are cleared very fast and the exports are brought into the port very fast. But in other countries like in the Europe, there are berthing delays of maybe about a week, and even in US there's a berthing delay of about a week. So I think we've handled the situation quite well. So if you take the volume wise, the Port of Colombo in 2019 handled 7.2 million TEUs.
TEUs is in
TEUs is called 20 equivalent units. That is how we you count the number of containers. A 20-foot container is called a TEU.
Understood.
So that's how we call how we do the numbers in the shipping industry. So as against last year, the COVID year, it dropped down to 6.85 million, a 5% drop, but still for a port that is handling mainly transshipment, that was a significant drop overall. And also what we saw was there was a dip in the imports. Imports dipped by about 17%, exports dipped by about 10%. And of course, the transshipment volume dipped not by very much, and only about 4 or 5%, but still for all, the Port of Colombo throughput was down by 5%. All in all, I think that also affected the COVID also affected other services that we could offer. There were the imports of vehicles were curtailed. The car carriers started not calling Sri Lanka, because normally cruise vessels have about 60 calls per year in the Port of Colombo. It was down just to 20 vessels, because only the vessels that came in January and February were permitted to come in. Of course, the port ensured, because of safety reasons, health reasons, that the cruise vessels could not come into the port. But be that as it may, all those are services that bring in revenue to Sri Lanka, as well as we also provide activities for the outside parties, like the tour operators, the shops,
the hotels,
all those businesses sort of gets curtailed because the cruise vessels stop calling. Then also when you take in respect of the import cargo, I think most of all the issue has been the restrictions that came about. Then also we had an issue regarding the berthing. We had certain berthing delays, which also caused congestion in the port. Vessels could not berth, but all in all, I think we managed to overcome all that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Ikram, let's talk about this term container terminal. Now we hear the term harbour, we hear the term port, and then also this container terminal. What exactly is a container terminal? Because I'm asking this question so that even a layman who is new to this topic, who has been hearing this term and is confused between maybe a container terminal, port, harbour, etc. There's a lot of terminology for someone who is not an industry insider.
Yes.
What exactly is a container terminal, and who are the stakeholders in a container terminal? If you could just demystify this for us.
Okay, right. When you take a harbour, the harbour consists of berths that handle all types of cargo. So in a typical port, you will have a berth that handles containers. You will have a berth that handles bulk cargo, that is like sugar, bulk sugar, or bulk cement, or bulk fertilizer, or bulk clinker. Then you have berths that handle liquid bulk, like petroleum products, chemicals, etc. Then you also have berths that handle coal, etc. Then you have a specialized berth that handles containers. So when you say a berth that handles containers exclusively is called a container terminal. So with the shipping industry moving into containerization in the late 70s, the movement of cargo in containers has been the most sought after mode of transport, mainly because one is its safety, one is its easy accessibility of carrying the cargo, and also the damages are less to the cargo because it is all loaded in a container. The container is carried from place to place, and you take the cargo out from the container at the destination. So by that, there has been the containerization has really picked up overall worldwide, and definitely that is the way forward in the world.
Ikram, when we talk about ports, now we have the Colombo port and then also the Hambantota port.
Yes.
Now this was a quite hotly debated topic. Different government political parties, we've seen them throwing the blame at each other, etc. But the truth is, there was a deal struck where it was handed over to, I believe, to the Chinese government or maybe a particular Chinese company to operate it. And that also is some people are doubting. Is it a company that is running it? Is it basically a government that is running it? But what exactly is the deal with, well, it's a Sri Lankan port, it's on Sri Lankan land, but it's owned by another government or maybe another company affiliated with the government. What's the exact deal that is happening there, and was it given because we couldn't meet a particular debt requirement? You would know this best because you are in the forefront of the industry.
Well, I think firstly we need to get the perception right that the port was not leased to the Chinese government. No, it was not. Because if you take the port of Hambantota, the deal was that the shares of the port were given to two Sri Lankan companies, Sri Lankan registered companies.
Understood.
Called Hambantota Port Group and Hambantota Port Services. Of course, the shareholding in those particular companies were China Merchant Port Holdings and the Sri Lankan Ports Authority.
Understood.
China Merchant Port Holdings also is a company listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So it is also a public quoted company. So true, they may have their headquarters in China, etc. So, but they are a port operator, a worldwide terminal operator, and they are certainly a company who brings value to the table. As far as I am concerned, in respect of the deal, I think true, we spent so much of money into the port, because usually when you build a port, you will do economic feasibility, operational feasibility, sustainability, affordability. All those things are done in advance to ensure that whatever the money that you're putting in,
Yes.
you are able to recover it. And also there's a benefit to the country, benefit to the organization, benefit to the economy. I would say yes, we were unable to really repay the loan, and we had to find an alternative way out. So shares were sold to these companies that were set up.
Understood.
But 100% these are all local companies with foreign shareholding. That is a different matter. Then also what you have to understand is, when a company invests so much money in getting the shareholding in a port, they are not just going to let it idle. They will ensure that it operates profitably,
Absolutely.
it operates efficiently, and also it brings value to the shareholders. Because just because you put in $1 billion, you're going to ensure that that is going to make money for you. So giving it out to a port operator, yes, that's the way forward. That's the way how you need to develop, because China Merchant Holdings has ports right around the world. They have excellent relationship with all the shipping lines.
So it's easier to bring more ships in.
They are able to bring in
Understood.
the business, get the shipping lines into the port, and also ensure that the port is operated efficiently and also profitably.
We're going to come back to that after this
Sure.
break, Ikram. Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Our focus today is on the Sri Lankan ports and shipping related industries, a much heavily debated topic on many different circles. But let's talk about the pressing issue. Of course, one might say, okay, the issue has been sorted, people are not even talking about it anymore. The Eastern Container Terminal. There was so much of business and political and economic aspects about these things spoken, but let's get down to the business of it. What exactly was going on? What was that entire episode about? We were first hearing that Eastern Container Terminal was given, and that's okay, or that's not okay. It's okay to give the Western Container Terminal. I mean, there was so much of noise and hype. Let's denoise everything and understand what exactly happened there. And joining me for this discussion and to demystify a lot of these complex areas is the chairman of CASA, who is none other than Mr. Ikram Kutilan. Ikram, now let's talk about this Eastern Container Terminal. What was that episode about? Earlier, the plan was to have it operated with India and Japan. Then there was a focus saying, no, we'll only give it to an Indian party. Then there was a lot of political talk about it, a lot of different pressures. We saw the trade unions getting onto the streets. Now they say, no, we will operate it only with the SLPA. Some parties are now saying, no, Eastern Container Terminal should be operated by SLPA. Western Container Terminal, that's fine. Let's do it with another party. What's exactly going on here?
I think the politics coming into the port operation just cause a problem for everyone. I think first and foremost, the East Container Terminal was developed by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority in 2012, 2013. They were going to operate it. They constructed 450 meters of berth, and also they ordered the cranes for the terminal.
And this was, I believe, the third or fourth terminal like that in Sri Lanka, in our Colombo port?
I think the first privatized terminal was the SAGT.
SAGT, South Asia Gateway.
That's right, in 1999, where the government privatized what was formerly called the Queen Elizabeth Container Terminal.
And to this date, it's one of the success stories of a public-private partnership.
Definitely, because what they brought in was expertise, the know-how, the technology and all that, and also they upped the game, because to make it a world-class port. Absolutely. So obviously when SAGT came in, JCT also had to compete.
JCT is
the Jaya Container Terminal, which is 100% owned by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. So they also had to increase their efficiency, increase the productivity, and compete with SAGT.
And that's the exact purpose of bringing in the private sector to a certain extent.
That you need to bring in the best practices, you need to bring in technology, and you need knowledge transfer. I think that was what happened. Then of course in 2006-07, the Ports Authority called for tenders for the East Container, because they had the port expansion program where they built the breakwater for the south port of Colombo, that is the extension of the port of Colombo. Then they called for tenders for the South Container Terminal, which is now called CICT.
That's a Chinese owned, or Chinese company owned?
That's correct, yes. And
so how does, when you say that they are owning it, they own it?
It's basically we have to understand that in 2007, they called for international tenders.
Understood.
Right? There were 7 companies that bid for the tender: international port operators, shipping lines, conglomerates from Sri Lanka, and unfortunately, the government in 2008 cancelled the tender. Then again in 2009, they called for bids again. That was also open tender, right? And that was a time where we had the world economic crisis.
Correct.
And
the war was just finishing.
Yes. And there was only one bidder.
Yes.
And that was China Merchant Ports along with Aitken Spence. And there was nobody else. So had there been another bidder, had there been other parties bidding, certainly it was open tenders. They could have given to the best party bidding. Understood. But there was one party, so it was given to the consortium containing China Merchants and Aitken Spence. So that started operating.
Understood.
Then in this particular thing, the East Container Terminal, what happened was the government decided to build it, because they saw that there was a big advantage in operating a deep draft terminal, because that is where all the larger ships, the ships were getting larger, so there was going to be more vessels going to call Colombo and attract vessels to Colombo. Unfortunately, with the change of government, they cancelled the tender for the cranes, and then the Ports Authority in 2016 decided to call for expressions of interest from interested parties.
Understood.
But then I think the geopolitics came into play again, where I think certain governments within the region wanted a stake in it. So there was a condition in the expressions of interest which says that any consortium should include a strategic investor from the region
Understood.
who was going to hold no less than 20% of the shareholding. So that was in 2016. And again, there were 9 consortium that bid for it. We had all the top terminal operators, we had the top shipping lines, we had the top conglomerates, we had companies from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all bidding for it. But then in 2018, it just fizzled out. Nothing happened. And in 2018, the president of Sri Lanka made a statement in the port saying, look, we are going to operate it again. And that
Lot of start, stop, start,
exactly,
stop.
Yes.
Not very healthy for any industry.
Definitely. And then in 2019, the MOC was signed. And that's where we stood until this government came and decided,
But
okay.
has this eastern terminal been operating since 2012-13? Or?
No, it was not operational
So
because
economic resource lying empty.
There were no cranes there.
Okay.
So I think for almost 5 years it lay idle. Of course, they also started berthing ships which are not container ships, like general cargo ships, steel vessels and all that, because whatever vessels that had deep draft could come there, and they were operating those vessels there, but not container vessels. But then in 2019, 2020, I think they ordered cranes for the JCT terminal extension. Since the extension was not ready, they placed those cranes at ECT and started operating container ships at ECT. So I think, unfortunately, we lost 5 years where we could have made so much money, and also we could have ensured that the port of Colombo would not have come to a position where there was congestion, where the shipping lines would consider Colombo as a port that was growing, adding capacity, as well as ensuring that there was going to be stoppage of work.
And as we stand right now, what is the understanding? Is it going to be fully operated by SLPA, or, and also what is this talk about a western container terminal? Is it already developed, or does it have to get developed?
Well, the East Container Terminal is going to be operated by the SLPA.
That means they will have to do the investments and bring in the equipment, etc.
That's correct. That have to do that.
What kind of investment are we looking at, Ikram?
I think overall at least $550 to $600 million.
Bit of a stress for a country struggling with their foreign currency reserves, isn't it?
That's certainly going to be, because it's the taxpayers' money that they are going to be pumping into that again. So that's quite a challenge. But still, for all, as industry, what we're happy is that a decision has been taken to operate it, because there was so much of idling time that we've seen, which was not at all good for the country, not at all good for Colombo.
Correct.
And at least now that the government had decided that we are going to operate it, yes, well and good, that's good.
Let's get it going.
They need to start and get it going. Now, what is, on respect to the western, because the Colombo South Port consists of 3 terminals. Initially, the South Terminal, which is the CICT, the East Terminal, and also the West Terminal. Now, the West Terminal, there is nothing there. It's only water. So, whoever is going to develop that has got to do the drawings, who's got to do the reclamation, and who's got to build it from scratch. So, as you know, currently 1,200 meters is the key length that is planned for East Terminal and also West Terminal, and you got to start from scratch, and that's going to cost at least about $600 to $700 million for the construction of the West Container Terminal.
Understood. So, if you look at the pros and cons, having the government or the Sri Lanka Ports Authority operating these terminals versus doing it with foreign collaborations, what are the pros and cons? And I have another burning question I need to ask from you here. There are some complaints saying that the land is being sold to foreign parties, which doesn't seem to be the case. It's the company that is operating that will be owned partly by foreign parties and partly by us. And what about employment in these terminals? Because one of the key concerns I have as a journalist asking these questions from you is, what about the job opportunities coming from these ports? I believe it should be going to Sri Lankans. But there's a lot of complaints that even in the Hambantota port, a lot of jobs are going to various Chinese nationals. What is your take on this, Ikram?
Well, I think that perception is also absolutely wrong. And first and foremost, there is job creation for Sri Lankans. Now, if you take SAGT, almost 100% are Sri Lankans. If you take CICT, okay, you may have a few Chinese nationals who have certain expertise in certain areas being brought in into the initial years. Obviously, when a foreign investor comes
For
in,
sure, you need a few people from
have
your
to
own
you have to work with bring in their technology, bring in their knowledge, bring in their systems, etc. So they need to come in and work.
For sure.
But by and large, I think the rest of the ground staff, the operations staff, everything are Sri Lankans.
Understood.
Even in Hambantota, there are certain amount of Chinese people are working, but it's a small percentage when you take the whole number of people that work. I think the advantage with the private sector terminals is that they are more efficient. The workers are also more efficient, because I think with a terminal you can operate with about 500-600 people, whereas some of the government terminals you need more people. So I think by the private sector coming in, definitely there is going to be a huge efficiency level increase in Sri Lanka. And on the question of whether the ports are being sold, no. The ports are owned by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. It's a 100% government-owned entity. They're only leasing that particular berth or that particular area where they are operating. Understood. For a particular period. So, and when you give a lease, there are certain terms and conditions that are agreed upon. So, definitely I don't see there is something that the country is being sold, or the berth is being sold, or the port is being sold.
Understood. What about the lessons we can learn from regional giants in this industry? For example, Singapore, despite being much smaller than Sri Lanka, we can see that they've got the formula right. They seem to be having the different nations also balanced. They have different players playing a key role. And is Singapore also operating a similar method where they lease out facilities to some of these foreign companies? How do they do it? Because they are clearly leaps and bounds ahead of us in this industry. Don't you think so?
Definitely. I think first and foremost, what we need is a clear policy that doesn't keep changing.
Every 5 years.
There has to be a consistency in whatever policy that we lay down. That's the only way you'll be able to attract foreign investors. Now, if you take international ports like Singapore, etc., true, initially they started as the government port.
Correct.
The Port of Singapore Authority. But then they changed their game. Now what they do is they tie up with foreign lines, because it's the lines who control the cargo. So when the port ties up with a particular line, they have a JV with the particular line.
A joint venture.
That's right. The lines, because of the investment there, they are able to bring in the cargoes because they feel this is where we operate.
Correct.
So that's one way of attracting cargoes into those particular
and
ports.
When the cargoes come in, the people in the country get jobs.
Yes.
When the employees in those cargo ships go out to the city, the hotels get work.
Yeah.
The food vendor, someone who
Everybody.
is selling even something on the street, gets an economic opportunity.
Exactly.
The ripple effect.
Correct, yes. And not only that, Tharindu, you also have the situation of other services that you can provide. It's not only the ship. You have the bunkering services, you have the...
And if you could define this, bunkering
is the supply of fuel to the ships.
Understood.
Yes,
Understood.
because I think Singapore, they don't have any oil wells, and they are the largest bunker suppliers in the world.
Wow.
Right?
Smart economic planning.
Exactly, right? And I think that is where we lost out.
And Lee Kuan Yew had specific focus on the ports industry, isn't it?
Correct, yes.
And I believe Singapore is one of the largest providers of repair and maintenance services to the shipping industry as well.
Exactly. Because when you fly over Singapore, you see the number of ships
Absolutely.
that are...
When you're about to land.
Yes. The hundreds and hundreds of ships. So which is, I think, bringing so much of foreign exchange into the economy. And also jobs, all that. I think what we lost out is basically as a bunkering hub. Because Colombo was considered a bunkering hub long ago, but I think with the nationalization of the petroleum industry long ago, I think we moved out, all the multinationals who were into the petroleum industry moved out, and Singapore welcomed them. And I think they set up shop there, and now they are supplying, now they're the largest bunker suppliers.
Understood.
And also Singapore has become a maritime hub because of the ability to provide various services. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, we are only considered a transshipment hub. transshipment hub is where cargo is brought in, discharged and loaded onto another ship and taken away. But we aspire to be a maritime hub. A maritime hub is a place where you offer a gamut of other services, where you have crew changes, crew training, additionally arbitration, ship financing, ship brokering, ship chartering, all that. Those are things that bring in the foreign exchange into the country.
And more value added services as well.
Yes. And also it also brings in the employment to Sri Lankans.
Absolutely.
Because it exposes us to the international world, and that is what we are looking for.
Understood.
And all those countries, that's where where the government has a consistent policy. They don't change, because when you have the government has a policy, even the geopolitical issues don't come up.
Absolutely.
Because
they know you can't mess with them.
Exactly. They know which direction the government is going through.
For sure.
Yeah.
What policies do we need to strengthen the ports and shipping related industry of Sri Lanka? And if you are planning to be a professional in this industry, what are the opportunities that are available for you? As a young student, could you aspire to be in this field? Let's talk about that and more after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Our focus is on the shipping and ports related industries of Sri Lanka. Now, we discussed about what went on with regard to some of the container terminals and what strategic decisions we need to make and what lessons we can learn from some of the regional shipping giants like Singapore, who has made many great strides ahead of us in this sector. But let's talk about government policy. What decisions we need to take in order to strengthen this sector in Sri Lanka. And joining me for this very insightful discussion is the chairman of CASA, or the Ceylon Ceylon Association of Shipping Agents of Sri Lanka, who is none other than Mr. Ikram Kutilan. Ikram, let's talk about government policy. We mentioned about this many a times before, but my question is more towards what kind of a policy do we need? Yes, we need to have a strong, consistent policy, but if the government is to take some policy decisions to become for Sri Lanka to be a smarter player in ports and shipping related industries, what kind of policy decisions do we need?
I think first and foremost, the government should ensure that going forward, the terminals, how are they going to operate? Whether it's going to be a PPP or whether it's going to be government operated. So that decision has to be made, and that has to be consistent. You cannot have fits and starts trying to decide as and when somebody changes or some person decides to adjust them.
And this whole business with calling in tenders, then just idling with those tenders, calling in tenders, cancelling, I mean, it makes us look like a joke in a global economy.
Absolutely. I think that's where the confidence levels of foreign investors in the port industry has sort of really deteriorated. I think first and foremost, if we call for tenders, we must ensure that we go ahead with it. Otherwise, you must not call for it. Yes. And also, when you call for tenders and you're cancelling, you should have the decency to inform the tenderer, sorry, we have decided to cancel it, which unfortunately sometimes doesn't happen.
It's basic courtesy.
That's right. Now, and also, I think in respect of the maritime policy, I think the maritime policy several policies have come out. I think at every government, somebody decides they bring in a policy, then that's shelved. I think there was a policy that was done in 2018-19, which was we got all the stakeholders to get involved. I think that's also was present to the government. It was requested to be present to cabinet. But I think that is also lying idle somewhere down the line. The amount of work that went in,
somewhere.
Exactly, the amount of work that went in by the industry experts was tremendous. And I think if that came out, I think the government doesn't have to do very much, because everything is laid down there, and just follow that.
So all the players of these industries got together.
Exactly, yeah. I think also what is also important is that, true, we have a geographic location which is advantageous. But it's not having the geographic location. It must be how we take advantage of the geographic location.
You can't sit on that advantage.
Okay, we've managed to do it all these years, but not anymore, because we are having other ports being developed in India. We are also having competition from other hub ports, and we are having other shipping lines looking at other ports, because obviously there is we have had congestion in the port of Colombo, and the development plans are not really spelled out very clearly. So shipping lines, what they look at is forward development in a port. So if they know, right, Colombo port is going to have in the year 2025 so many berths, in the year 2030 so many berths, because they also plan 3-4 years ahead when they order tonnage, when they start their services and all that. They look at the development plans in the port and then decide which ports to call. So if we don't have a plan, and if we are not ready, we get left by the wayside. And currently, if you see, the 3 major world alliances of shipping lines which handle 80% of the cargo movement, and that's huge. So when you say 3 alliances, you're talking of about 10 shipping lines, 80% of the cargo movement. So, and if those alliances don't call at your port, you'll be left out. So I think what is also important is that
right now, are they calling into our ports?
Yes, we do have, but not all services. Now if you see, maybe one service on a particular string. If they are having 10 services from Far East to Europe, maybe one string calls Colombo. You take Singapore, maybe about 5-6 strings call at Colombo. That's in Singapore, because they know there is efficiency there, they know there is capacity there, and also they have made that their transshipment hub for that particular region. So as far as Colombo is concerned, it may be one service is calling. So I think we have to develop that. Additionally, I think the vision of, I think in late 70s of Mr. Atulat Modili made the foundation for Colombo to be developed as a transshipment hub. We need visionary leaders like that to keep taking the port forward. And also, we should not be happy as a transshipment hub. We need to make it a maritime hub. For that, we have to have legislation, we have to have the ease of doing business, we have to have all those legal laws, etc. change, because currently I think we are ranked very low in the ease of doing business and the logistics index.
Understood.
So all the foreign shipping lines and also the foreign players look at those indices to ensure to call Colombo and do business in Colombo. So when you have roadblocks, when you have red tape, etc., who will want to come?
I believe as a shipping agent yourself, you probably, when you try to approach other shipping lines and say, look, come and call in here, they must be bringing out these concerns.
Definitely.
It's not easy, we can much easily go there. I understand your viewpoint there.
There are a lot of restrictions that way. I think the government has to ensure, I'm sure that under the deregulation committee that they are looking at, that they will look at it very seriously.
Sure.
Because if we are to get shipping lines and investors, I think ease of doing business is critical.
Ikram, for a young student who is watching this show, or maybe a young professional who is looking at what industry am I going to get into, is this a good career to be in, and are there going to be potential opportunities, especially with developments in the port? Then we hear about the port city, etc., with so many different projects being there. Is this a sector where there will be a lot of opportunity?
I think as far as I'm concerned, shipping and is a part of the logistics chain. It's a part of the supply chain, and it's an industry that has evolved over the years. And there are numerous opportunities for any aspiring youngster. Number one, in the shipping industry, you have the seafarers, who I think Sri Lankan have maybe about 20-25,000 seafarers who are engaged in ships.
And earning well?
We're earning very well. And also we have some of the best maritime schools in Sri Lanka, and we can they are easily able to follow the courses and rise up the ladder on ships. Then also there are about 130 shipping agency companies in Sri Lanka involved in shipping agency business alone, in addition to all the freight forwarders, all the consolidators, all that. It's a huge business fraternity that we have. And also what we've seen over the past maybe 10 years, we've seen the universities and all the business colleges offering the logistics degree, which is definitely a stepping stone into the shipping industry. And the number of students that who are applying for this logistics degree are quite a number who are coming in. And I can proudly say that everybody who does a logistics degree finds a job.
Absolutely.
So which I think the ability to find employment is critical in doing any in an industry. So I think that has been the plus point in the logistics industry.
Sure.
Because we are not only looking at shipping agency business. It's like I said, it's a gamut of other areas.
And entire maritime wise.
That's right.
I think some very valid points there, Ikram. On a final note, this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but the biggest fear that a lot of people seem to be having in many fronts is that by letting these regional giants set up operations in the shipping sector of Sri Lanka or in different ports, that invariably we are also helping them to set up a military presence. For example, there's a lot of talk, okay, Hambantota port, with the Chinese party, can the Chinese be looking at having a military presence? I mean, these are concerns which are doing echoes in many different political, social and economic circles around the country. What is your thought on that? Is this something that can come back to haunt us, or is this just a case of some people crying wolf? What is your thought on this?
I think as an industry professional, this is an absolute myth, absolute, because all ports in Sri Lanka are owned by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, which is a 100% government owned entity, right? When the Ports Authority offers concessions for the terminal operators or port operators to operate the ports, there are certain conditions that are laid in those particular concession agreements, and definitely there is nothing to say that they can handle military ships. So that is a part and parcel of any concession agreement.
So they cannot bring in military ships to these ports?
Because for any military ship to come to Sri Lanka, there is a protocol that should be followed. Firstly, they've got to get the Foreign Ministry approval. Otherwise, any military ship cannot come here. Secondly, the Defence Ministry approval. And also, the berth, if they are calling at Colombo, the berth is allocated by the harbour master, nobody else. If it goes to Hambantota, the berth is allocated by the harbour master. So
this is quite a tedious process, isn't it?
Correct,
I mean,
yes.
It's not something where they can decide and just
you
sail in like you sail in a sailboat.
You cannot. There is no way that can really happen. And also the other freight is okay, ships coming as cargo vessels doing military work. No. When a vessel comes into a port, there are a lot of information that has to be provided, like the details of the vessel, the details of the cargo, etc. And if they are bringing any arms and ammunitions, etc., that has to be sent to the Defence Minister and approval has got to be obtained.
Yes.
So if all those procedures are followed, the Sri Lankan government is very strict on those procedures being followed. So I think there is no way that any port can be a military base for another country, because the government ensures that such things will not happen.
Understood. Today, we were focused on demystifying and debunking many myths regarding the foreign investments towards the Sri Lankan ports and shipping related industries. I'm quite thankful to the chairman of the Ceylon Association of Shipping Agents, Mr. Ikram Kutilan, for having joined us today. Ikram, this is quite a wide area and an industry, and you definitely touched upon so many different facets, made it very clear to us and showed what was really needed to take this industry forward. I would like to wish you and the team at CSA good luck in further strengthening this sector in Sri Lanka. May you be able to sail our industry forward in the right direction to greater strengths. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Tarinder, for having me on your program. Thank you very much.
And with that, we wrap up today's episode of Bisnomics. This is your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I will see you with the next episode.